What's up, guys? I'm James Bainey, and I'm here with Kyle Larson, and we are getting ready to do a spoiler-filled book discussion on Galaxy's Edge, Black Spire. Stick around. All right, so hey, we're back, man. Got another book to look at. This one came a little bit later than all the other Galaxy's Edge books that we just got done with, right?
Yeah, I was surprised because chronologically it's the first book, but it came last. So I guess they were saving what they thought was the best for last. So it's interesting to me that it was released like that.
Yeah. Let's, before we get too deep into it, let's talk a little bit about the book itself. What we're getting ready to talk about, and this is a full spoiler review, but we are going to be discussing Galaxy's Edge, Black Spire. It was released August 27th, 2019, written by Delilah S. Dawson, read by January Lavoie for the audiobook, published by Del Rey and Random House Audio. And this book's timeline is rather interesting. We're going to get into it, but the basic idea is months after The Last Jedi. So it definitely takes place after The Last Jedi. We had to kind of nail this stuff out before we even started the discussion, but yeah, the timeline of this book and how it fits into some of the other Galaxy's Edge material and how it fits into the park itself is really interesting. We kind of came to the conclusion that we believe that the park ride or the park theme park takes place like in one specific day, and where that day fits into the timeline of, say, like this book and Crash of Fate is like really interesting. I think that everything in this book takes place before you visit the park.
Yes,
that's my understanding.
I would go with that too, and the same with Crash of Fate as well. It seems like both of these are kind of the endings kind of converge where you enter the park and where you're going to eventually enter the Rise of the Resistance.
Yes.
Before, I think we were confused about whether that would be Rise of Skywalker, but it's pretty certain.
I mean, it's still possible. I wouldn't put it past somebody if they said, I think that all the stuff that happens at the end of this with all that stuff showing up and the battle happening could be Rise of Skywalker related. I would listen to that argument. I would entertain that argument.
Yes.
But I'm not entirely sure that they're just not planning on having a battle with the First Order and the Resistance kind of taking place above Batuu sometime before the Rise of Skywalker, and they don't really want to get too detailed about it.
Yeah, and I wonder too, because we have quite a bit of material to come under the Journey to the Rise of Skywalker moniker too. So I wonder if any of it is going to kind of segue into that as well. But yeah, it's interesting in the way that this material trickled out. Especially since this kind of establishes everything and why the Resistance is on Batuu and why the First Order has come to Batuu as well. Because, they were more or less the catalyst to bring the First Order to Batuu because they really wanted to get to Vi. Yeah.
And this book, throughout the process, it's like, hey, can you send more troops and stuff? And it's like, no, we can't. So we know there's X-Wings and A-Wings and other things like that at the park, but they're not in this book. We know that the Millennium Falcon is at the park, but it's not in this book. So you have to assume that everything that's happening in the park takes place after the book. And then you have another book like, say, Pirates Price, for instance, which clearly takes place after the Millennium Falcon is already there, after Hondo's already there, after Transport Solutions has gotten up and running and things like that. So, so Pirates Price also probably takes place like before the park day, but after Black Spire for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because you at the end of Pirate's Price, or not, maybe not even at the end, you hear that like Hondo's actually met Rey. He's actually he's talked to Chewbacca. He checked in with him, and the Millennium Falcon's there, and he's clearly like had this operation going for a while. This kind of front for the Resistance.
Yeah,
so
and by this point too, we already know Rey's at the park, Chewbacca's at the park, Hondo's at the park. And then this isn't actually like official. I mean, I guess it could be, but like they hand you a pamphlet as you're walking into the park, and it's like a map of the area and stuff. And while you don't have access to it right now, they have like a wall up on the map. You can see that Poe's Black One is parked somewhere, and then also a blockade runner is kind of sticking out of like a cave hangar, if you will. So that kind of points to some weird stuff. Like Black One is blown up, so I don't know, maybe he gets another one or he builds another one or something. I don't know how they're going to fit that in. And then the other part of it is that blockade runner looks and appears to be all the ones that we've seen in The Rise of Skywalker. So that ship is currently on Batuu before it eventually makes its way to wherever it is in Rise of Skywalker. Like it's not gonna get blown up or something. It's there. It's stationed on Batuu before the Resistance shows up in large quantities. There's a lot to talk about because that Rise of the Resistance trailer shows you're on a First Order ship and the Resistance shows up in like bigger amounts. So I don't know. It's all kind of tricky, but do you have anything else to add about the timeline? And then we can actually like talk about the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, just what you said right there, and you mentioned this before we started recording too, that just makes me think that in some canonical, realm, we're gonna see the big players of the Resistance on Batuu. And like maybe they're like on the run from the First Order, and like that's their like refuge, and they go there and they just stop for a second and pick up the rest of the Resistance there, and then they're back on their way, leading into whatever the events of Rise of Skywalker are. But that blockade and that and the fact that it's like it's there, but like it's not really there, and they're not really talking about it. That makes me think like there's more story that they're going to tell with this theme park. So that's very interesting to me.
Because, all right. So, go ahead.
No. Yeah. Let's get into the book though.
All right, let's start this off with initial thoughts and score. What did you give this book as far as a score?
I give this book a 7.5, which in my book is like a C plus B minus. And I did that because, and I also in my review, made note of this. I was kind of at the end of my Galaxy's Edge run in terms of content. And so because I think the book had a lot working against it, because a lot of the events in the book take place before everything else that we've read. So it was really kind of, it wasn't as exciting to me. And like, oh, they go into Black Spire to explore things, and I felt like a lot of the descriptions and a lot of the kind of name dropping became redundant when Delilah S. Dawson is an incredible writer, and I would never take anything away from her abilities there, but I felt like her skills could have been used better to introduce these new characters that we meet in the book that eventually become part of the Resistance. So that was why I kind of gave it a lowish score. How about you?
I would say that's kind of a highish score.
Okay.
I was thinking about this too when, I don't know if I've explained this in other videos, but it's always good to kind of refresh like what we are basing this on when we give a number. I think of a five as it doesn't do anything for me. Anything above a 5 is something that I liked, and anything below a 5 is something that I'm like, I wasn't really a fan of this book. That 5 is like the middle ground for me. Whereas I think most people think of like a 75 or something as like a C. So that's like, oh, it's like a middle ground. You didn't do great, but you didn't fail, Yeah. I think of the middle ground as more of like a 5. So, to me, I gave this book a 7.8.
Okay.
So I guess just like a little bit higher than yours. But for me, this is kind of on the upper end of I really like this book. Now, Phasma is one of my top novels that's been released. So I was really excited to go into this to revisit some of these characters. And I think that I think that Vi as a character has grown, but I'm way more interested in not that he's going anywhere. Spoiler, he dies.
Yeah.
But Archex, like Cardinal and Archex, that whole like it's like the first book was like the up, and this was like the down. You know. In a way. And, or I guess I shouldn't say that. I should say part 1, part 2, right?
Yeah.
For that character. As far as and we can get into more of those details later, but, as far as the actual book goes though, I did really, enjoy listening to this character as they were like, well, here we are, we don't got anything. And then slowly they introduce one more character. Slowly they introduce one other character. Slowly they introduce, this third member of the resistance. And I felt like in contrast, we were recently, actually we didn't do a review on it, but we kind of talked a little bit about Alphabet Squadron, and it felt like they were just throwing things all at once, and it was too hard to grasp onto who was who and know a whole lot about some of those characters. And this is like, for me personally, this was like the perfect delivery. It was like, you already know these characters, but we're going to set you up with who they are. Once you've learned their day-to-day, what their routine is, we're going to introduce one more element for you. We're going to introduce one more element for you. And by the end of the book, it was like watching the Avengers. I've seen Iron Man, I've seen Thor, I've seen Captain America. Now I'm seeing them all work together and how they all click. And it reminded me of that spirit of Star Wars, Here's Luke Skywalker. Here's Princess Leia, here's Han Solo, and then like seeing how they all click together and how they resolve whatever issues in front of them. So I thought that there's a lot of this that really like kind of captured the spirit of Star Wars for me, even though there's no space battles and traveling. They're just kind of like stuck on this planet. But not to mention like the underworld stuff too. There's a lot of like,
that was
gangsters
awesome.
and thievery and stuff. Yeah. So anything else? What should we talk about?
Well, I agree with you, 100% in terms of like the introduction of characters was very much in the vein of great Star Wars storytelling and great Star Wars characters. And I guess that was kind of like the thing that I kept hitting a wall about was I want to know more about these people. Like I want to know more about the characters that were introduced in Phasma, and I wanted to know more about the characters that they introduced in Black Spire. And I felt like, sometimes we got bogged down. There were a lot of chapters I felt that were a bit redundant with Vi kind of being in Black Spire Outpost doing this like menial work that she had to do to make ends meet for her crew, or to get her. She becomes her a gatherer. Back. Yeah.
Which a gatherer is a character. It's like one of the cast members in Savi's, salvage, secret lightsaber place at the park. And the people who are helping you build the lightsaber one-on-one are the gatherers. And I don't know. It's kind of interesting that, they try to make that a role or a job in the park. But I do think that there was a lot of, like, it almost felt like they were trying to make him important, but he's ultimately not. He's just kind of there to be like, oh, the Force is in this book too. We mention it. But the only way he's really important at all is because of like, Yelena. I can't remember how you say. Yeah, Elena. Yeah.
Yeah.
Her name starts with a Y though. I don't know what is with these books sometimes.
I just went with Elena.
Elena. It is Elena. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I have to hear it pronounced in the audiobook to go back, but. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of her backstory. That's where she comes from. And she was like, no, I can see your aura and stuff. And I don't know, I want to be part of this fight too. But ultimately, I think like at the end of the day, really, if you wanted to, you could have eliminated savvy in that character and stuff, and just taking it as what it is. And I don't really think the book would have changed that much.
Yeah, I agree. And that was again, like, one of my biggest hangups was I wanted to know more about, there was a lot of interesting stuff going on with Cardinal. And I felt like he really, even though he has a very impactful role in the story, I do feel like the descriptions and the development kind of took a backseat to that. And even, I even thought it was a bit of a hindrance for Vi as well. I felt like, she's in a lot of crazy situations, but at the same time, like, we just kept going back to her doing this kind of basic random stuff in there. But, Savi could have been, is basically like a placeholder for Lor Santeca even. And,
yeah,
because they
even mentioned
buddies.
He's friends with,
yeah. So,
it's kind of one of those things, like, I hate to criticize that because that's part of the book, in the sense of, okay, say you remove that, right? She doesn't get a day job, and the book isn't about her just living in this world and trying to slowly over time make recruits. That's what happened. That's the story. Yeah. She's sent here, and she's not like gonna go into the city and like put up a sign and say, anybody who wants to join the resistance, you, cool, yeah. And like bring him in. They're kind of telling a story of like, you're walking into a world of a bunch of people who literally do not care. They don't want to have anything to do with, and it's her job to convince these people. And it makes it believable when she's going to work for this company, because she just needs to have some way to make money and have supplies and things. I know they probably could have maybe not crashed her ship, and then she had the supplies, but then that sets up a lot of drama of her not knowing what to do, and her not being able to reach out to these people, giving her a point of like, well, okay, I need to save up to get blank, and that means I have to be here and I have to be one with the people. So I feel like those points of the story, while sometimes boring and they don't feel like they really go anywhere, they add to the overall story of her living in this world, which is trying to recruit
yeah,
people.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's really good that you point that out, because like, that's something that I didn't really consider until then. Like, it's until you just said that, she is in a pretty desperate place. She's been basically told to like run and hide by her mentor, General Leia Organa, and try to do her best to establish this waypoint station for the resistance. And, she crashed, and pretty much everything that could have gone wrong did. So she's just trying to like pick up the pieces and do what she can when these people on Batuu don't really, they don't really care. This is all so far removed.
The story is, how do you convince someone to care? That's what this book is.
Exactly.
In all honesty, how do you take somebody that doesn't want to pay attention to the political climate, and they just want to keep doing what they're doing and living their day, and realizing, you have to step up, you have to pay attention, you have to do this stuff. How do you convince somebody to actually like risk their lives? And she successfully convinces, X amount of people. So she really convinces like 5, but ultimately those 5 kind of rally and get some other people involved as well. Let's talk about some of these characters. Dolan is the first to be recruited. After that, the Chatterfan Kai. After that is Zadie, a smuggler. And then eventually Elena, at the very end there, she kind of shows up. But she doesn't even really fight in the final battle. So again, it's kind of like she's there and she's important in like a recruiting thing, and actually kind of in a weird way a love interest to Dolan. But I want to focus on those 3: Dolan, Zadie, and Kai.
Yeah, I do too. Those were the ones I was the most focused on from reading as well, and intrigued by. I really liked Zadie. I thought he reminded me a lot of Han Solo. You get your kind of classic smuggler, but maybe like Han Solo if he'd had a little bit more privilege, and had, not really just been thrown into that lifestyle. It's almost like Zadie kind of chose that life and chose everything. Whereas Han, from Solo, Star Wars story, you see that he didn't really have a choice. He just kind of did what he could to survive. And I really liked Dolan as well, like his story with kind of being a part of this like isolationist forager community, and then being brought in and realizing like, okay, I don't have the luxury anymore. Like if this evil is here, if it's arrived on my planet and arrived, I can't have the luxury of like, being this far removed from everything in the galaxy. I have to step forward and I have to fight, even though I think it's his grandmother who is like, no, like, don't do this. If you do this, like, you're no part of our family. You're rejecting everything that I've taught you. And he does it anyway, which I thought was he's really
being
cool.
disowned and walking into the dark blindly in order to do what he thinks is right. Yeah, exactly.
And those type of characters, I think that's why so many of us love Star Wars so much, is because those type of characters, they're the type of quality that they show in that kind of adversity is, it always blows me away. I mean, it's, just me sitting here, like, would I be able to do that type of thing? And then like the bravery and the courage that, just this person who, randomly met Vi, is deciding to kind of rise to the challenge, is remarkable. And I think that's, a testament to Dawson's writing as well. Like, she does a great job of convincing me that, like, wow, that really happened, even as extraordinary as it is.
Yeah. I think for me, Delilah S. Dawson might be like my number 2.
Right, Star Wars.
She's only written the 2 books. Yeah. She's written other things, little short stories and things like that. But I think like of two main books, because this one was really good to me, and Phasma's like one of my favorites. So this to me is like, I mean, if it could have exceeded Phasma, that would have been great. But at the same time, like, this book is still awesome. About the characters, I enjoyed the character of Kai, but at the same time, she was the only story that I was kind of, like, her family, her sister dies on Hosnian Prime, and you're supposed to kind of connect to that. I had a little bit of hard time because sometimes I felt like she was kind of like, I'm like, get over it.
Yeah.
And I know that's like horrible to say, because like every one of these other characters are kind of going through some pretty crazy stuff too. And maybe it's not even as crazy as her story, but for some reason there was something about like, hey, can you push these buttons? Of course I can do it. Oh, but I'm scared, so I might make mistakes. I'm like, well, just push the buttons. Like, you can, I know you can. And I don't really feel like there ever was a point in the book while she accomplishes the mission, I feel like she still finishes the mission being like, I hope it worked, and not like, I got over it and I overcame that fear and I did what I needed to do. It's like she did what she needed to do, but she never really got over the fear. Whereas I feel like all the other characters kind of like dealt with their tragedies in different ways, like for instance, Dolan did walk away. He even went back and still was like, I'm here to pick up some stuff and get my friends and things, but I'm out. I've left the nest. And Zadie, for instance, who I think is my favorite character out of the 3. Zadie is, and you described him earlier as Han Solo, but if this is not Jack Sparrow meets Hondo, I don't know. I don't know who is.
I didn't even think about Jack Sparrow, but yeah, totally.
When he's first introduced, he's at the bar, he's moving from table to table, he jumps up on the tables and he's tiptoeing around the drinks and stuff. And I'm like, this is Jack Sparrow, like 100%. And then as it went on, his personality kind of changed a little bit, but you started to learn a little bit more. Oh, also too, he was drunk all the time. They were saying that too, and I was like, totally. Oh, okay, so he kind of carries himself like he's full of rum. But But no, I mean, I can tell you like one of the most impactful stories is there's a section of the book where it literally goes from character to character and it talks about can they walk into tomorrow? And they, you know, each character has like their own chapter and they're like, this is what I've dealt with and I'm afraid to go into the next one. And Zadie's to me was probably the most intriguing of, we knew the story of him getting boarded and he lost his cargo and now he's caught up with Oga. But when we learn more about it from his internal monologue, he talks about how important this person was to him, possibly a love interest.
Yeah.
And to have her do the right thing, it says that this was the wrong time to stand up for the right thing or something like that. And they shot her and was like, any other questions? And he's like, no. And then they're like, all right, drag her body off of our ship, you know? It's just like, it's such a horrible, it sounds like Saving Private Ryan or something like something like a Nazi would do, like straight up, like killing a family member and then making you like bury them or something, you know? It was so awful. Horrible that, it gave me a lot of respect for the character. And when he ends up, you know, having accomplished a mission, he got a job. I felt like, oh, he's taking care of himself after this. And I don't mean to get too hung up on Zadie either, because I feel like who we should really be talking about is Archex.
Yeah, I do. I agree.
Well, give me some thoughts on Archex.
Well, I to kind of like follow up on the point that you were making is like, I think this book does a great job of establishing how incredibly evil the First Order is and how much they do to just really inundate and brainwash everyone who is under their spell. And Archex is a prime example of that, because we meet him where he's, you know, Vi's been tasked with getting him, and, you know, Leia's assigned her to get him and to bring him along on this mission. She's not really sure if that's a good idea, but she does it anyway. And he's so confused from this like deprogramming that's been done from him. She picks him up on a kind of like a rehabilitation center, essentially, to deprogram him from, you know, he describes moments, recalling moments in his past where he basically was sitting in his quarters, like sleeping, and he has First Order propaganda playing in the background, and that's like a comfort to him.
Yes.
And he kind of misses that in a way.
Like, it's so well written because he says, you love your bland food. You love the propaganda being sent into your head. You love getting up every single day and putting on the exact same thing and standing in the exact same spot and saying the exact same thing. Like, it's crazy because she does a very good job at writing, You know how they say, like in movies, they say the best villains are the villains that you're like, oh, that's bad, but I see where they're coming from.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, this is her writing a story that's like I totally 100% get why Archex is the way that he is. He lived for this thing and he was brainwashed, and it totally makes sense. And even though he has completely walked away from all of it and he's starting to see the light, you know he's still fighting with, why am I over here? Like, I kind of want to go back to the comfort of where I was at. It was better. It was easier then. And, oh man, I love that angle, you know? I think I'm talking myself into a little higher score.
No. Yeah, go
I might
for
give
it.
it that flat 8.
Well, that was the thing I said. I actually talked to Jordan about this when I was writing my review. I actually, as I was writing my review, because originally I had a bit of a lower score for the book, but as I was writing this, I was like, God, she really did knock this out of the park. Like, she did a great job with the story that, you know, was given and that she came up with, and these characters all interacting together. You know, in terms of, you know, a lot of people complain about it being a commercial for Galaxy's Edge, but like, it's a really good Star Wars story, and these characters are great, especially Archex too, and Vi. And I thought that it was interesting that she had basically the polar opposite of him, Kath, the First Order officer, as he's kind of a mirror for Archex. They were friends at one point, but he is so entrenched and he's so embraced this first order doctrine and just the worst tendencies of this like irredeemable villain, and has, you know, he's just as determined. Once he finds out that Archex is there with Vi, he's even more determined to get him because, you know, Archex, the Cardinal, you know, rejected everything. So I thought it was really cool how, you know, he's a pretty bland villain because he's very one-dimensional, he's very evil, but at the same time, the fact that he's the adversary in this tale and he represents like everything that Archex is trying to reject.
We needed that in this book. I take that as no flaw to the story at all because we needed the pure evil to counter the reason that Archex is dealing with what he's dealing with, considering he was that in the last book. Like we had the Resistance versus the First Order, and we had Vi being able to overcome and redeem and save that person. So in this book, there should be no redeeming qualities to the villain because we already did that, and we have this other character that absolutely needs to see why the Resistance is good and why the First Order is bad. Kath builds on Archex, so he has to be that. And I feel like that would be, if they like say they saved Kath as well, I'd be like, oh, okay. You know, so the First Order isn't as tough and driven as they say they are, you know?
Yeah.
And because they're all kind of like that, apparently.
Yeah, he's pretty much the Hux of the book. The Force Awakens version of Hux, where it's just like this evil guy. And it's I don't think it's a coincidence too that that's who he's regularly checking in with is General Hux, and you know, he really, really wants to make him happy and really wants to kind of move up in the ranks too. So,
all right, let's get to this. Favorite part, favorite thing about this book, about the book or a specific passage. What's up?
I love the first scene that Vi was exploring the ancient runes of where they're going to establish the base when she was going in there for Oga to try and get the, is it Oga or Aga? Oga, where she was going in there to try and get whatever the artifact was to basically like start negotiations. I love that scene and just the descriptions, and also the other scenes where she's being chased through there by the First Order as well. I thought that was really cool and kind of a like
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, it was very Indiana Jones. It was like homage to Indiana Jones. I thought that was really
I kept
neat.
Picturing Dr. Aphra, and then I'm like, nope, this is Vi Moradi. Yeah,
that's what I did too. So, yeah, I think that was probably my favorite part of the book, for sure.
Just real quick, because I know you'll just agree with me, and we'll move on. But like, we've talked about this character before. We've seen her in other books and stuff. But Ogagara in this book is phenomenal. I love her. I love exactly how she plays both sides. I love how she's devoted to Black Spire Outpost. You don't get to hear her, but in the book, January Lavoie does something really interesting with her voice, and I'm like, this is crazy because it's weird. It's like she's speaking English, but she's replicating Huttese because she's actually speaking Huttese, but they're reading it to you in English, and it's this weird like English Huttese accent. It's so cool. Like you should check it out.
Yeah,
I love the character Oga now, and I don't know. It just makes me respect. We haven't even we have so much we could talk about, but like I just recently went to Black Spire Outpost, the park, and having read half of this book before I went, and I thought, okay, well then I'll enjoy it more when I'm there. I actually enjoyed having been there and then finishing the book. Because it was I know these places. I know these buildings that this person's running around in. When they're like, oh, we just needed to go over to dock, or we just need to meet up in the cantina. I picture Vi and these characters like sitting where I sat.
Yeah.
I picture them there. And it helps so much to kind of just give an idea of what they're fighting for. It's so cool. But for me, my favorite part is Vi telling. Actually, I also really like Zadie giving his speech to everybody in the cantina when he stands up and he gives that like final speech about getting them rallied up. That was really cool. But I think the actual part that actually almost made me tear up is Vi telling Leia about Cardinal. She says the line, "He sacrificed himself to save me and keep our headquarters safe." And it just hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, man. This character has been through so much. It felt sometimes when I was like hearing what he was doing, what he was working on, what he was mentally processing about how he doesn't have a job and he doesn't have anything to do. It's like, it seriously felt like someone who had been in the military and now they have this like, they don't know how to assimilate themselves in regular life and they have this PTSD and they have this depression and they don't know what to live for anymore. And so when he finds this one final thing that he can do that could save the resistance and maybe pay off all of his debts to what he's done to people and he goes through with it, it's just so, it's like, I feel like his story could be, I don't know that this book could be, but his story or something like it could be a movie in itself. And you just like, by the end of that, when he's walking away, he like says, "May the force be with you." He like lips it to Vi and then turns around and never sees her again. Oh man, it's hitting me right now. It's tough.
Yeah, no,
that was by far my favorite part though.
Yeah, I mean, and he just wants companionship too. He just wants like a friend. He doesn't know, or he doesn't even know what he wants too. Like there's a scene where he tries to kiss her, and she clearly pulls away, but he's just so confused because he's like, what did I even do?
Issues and dealing with things and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's, and that's the thing is I think I referred to him in the review, and I didn't mean this to sound demeaning at all. It's just, he's very wounded throughout the story and he really doesn't find his strength till the end. And that's what's so touching about his sacrifice too. It's a very compelling character. And that's why, like, I would never, even though I wasn't crazy about this book, like she knocked it out of the park in terms of writing these characters. They're fantastic.
Any tidbits, Easter eggs, cool references? For me, Leia said, "Never tell me the odds" at one point. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But I think I'm going to speak for you for a second, but I feel like this book's Easter eggs are just every Galaxy's Edge park reference that's in the book. Like, oh, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to be fried Tim Tam or Tim Yam or whatever. And I'm like, that's literally something you can get at Outpost 7 bar,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It's literally so many references to him swigging down, this drink or that drink. And I'm like, yeah, you can order all those.
Isn't there a point too? Like, I think you texted me like a picture message where like they literally give you the directions to the bathroom or something.
Yes. So there is a specific thing in the book and I'm like, man, they are trying really hard to make this fit into the park and make it feel like they're actually at the park. There's a line in there where they were talking about how Savvy offers up free water or, and food and things like that. But she says, yeah, you have your canteen and then you can go over and there's a refilling drinking station between the bathrooms.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's at every park. It's like there's a little section where there's the men's room on the left, the women's room on the right. And then there's like a drinking fountain and a like water bottle station. And I'm like, seriously?
I know.
So those little things were a little bit too much sometimes, but I feel like if you removed yourself, like if there wasn't a park, you probably would have been like, oh, there's a lot of really cool details and new foods and drinks that they mentioned that are all new canon. And they just went into really good detail, but it feels weird when we know it's part of the park. I think that it's, like I said, if there wasn't a park, I think it wouldn't have been a big deal. But
yeah. The Easter eggs for me, I thought it was really cool how they were talking about the events of the last two films, The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, there's even a point where I think, and I don't have a direct quote from this, where they actually mention, like, people are starting to become aware about what Luke did on Crate, and people know about, like, Leia survived the attack on the Radis because of the Force. So, like, the Force is starting to become a thing again. People are starting to actually talk about it. It doesn't really become prevalent in this book, but, like, just the fact that they're putting it out there that, like, this extraordinary thing is happening in the galaxy, and maybe this wasn't just all, like, legends and mythology. And maybe there really are Jedi, and there really is a bigger battle going on between good and evil. So I thought that was those little tidbits that we got were really cool. I'm always kind of looking for that stuff anyway. So,
and I like how they tried to kind of reinforce their decision to do what they did with Leia in The Last Jedi, saying, like, oh, she didn't just use the Force randomly. It makes you think that she has always had the ability to use the Force. Like, since Return of the Jedi, maybe she has talked to her brother, maybe she has been trained, but she doesn't use them only when she needs to use them. So it might be a hint that we're going into The Rise of Skywalker. We've maybe gotten these scenes where looks like Leia and Rey are in the same area. Maybe Leia says things to Rey that, inspire her, and is kind of like I don't think they could do training, because obviously I don't think she said anything in the previous movies that would allude to, like, try flipping your laser sword like this. Like, she didn't say those lines. So you got that going. But getting back to the point, I'm totally with you. I like what they did with spreading the story of The Last Jedi into the rest of the galaxy. For sure. So our last thing that we do is we do, like, a ranking for fans of. I have this book right above Aftermath Life Debt, but below the original Thrawn book. But I don't know, man. Now that I've had this conversation, I feel like I kind of might want to move it around a little bit. But yeah, that's where I've got it. I think for fans of Aftermath, because that to me is the story that I think a lot of people didn't connect with Aftermath, being like they didn't know what to expect. But to me, Aftermath was kind of like a repeat of Rebels. Like, you could almost assign every character to, like, oh, this character's Ezra, this character's Hera, this character's like the Kanan, this character's like the Zeb. And you could put it together like that. And I enjoyed that aspect, having loved Rebels. I'm reading this book now and I'm like, okay, cool. So I see how these characters all kind of come together, and they're all their different people, and they now meet up like this. And that's how I felt the whole way through this book, is like, you have different walks of life all coming together to defeat the evil. And so that's why I would say, if you liked Aftermath, you'd probably like this one too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Mine were a little bit different. I thought that, and it's mostly because I've just recently read Alphabet Squadron. I kept kind of coming back to, I thought that this book did a much better job of cohesion with the characters that they introduced, where Alphabet Squadron, it was a little more scattered. And I would agree with the Aftermath as well. And also like a bit of Inferno Squad too, because we know that the Inferno Squad. I'm
glad you said it, because I wanted to, but I didn't.
Yeah, and I loved that book. That's one of, like, the highest rankings I've given a book. I thought it was great, and I thought it was really good because it involved characters who have been so gung ho about everything, kind of starting to question that and seeing the cracks in things too, while also trying to just perform their basic duties. So yeah, I think that's a good list.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got it, guys. That's it. That's our spoiler discussion on Galaxy's Edge Black Spire. So where are we at now? You gotta give us a like if you enjoyed the discussion.
You too. You gotta like it.
But I think you really got to hit up that comments section. Let's have a conversation. Me and Kyle, we tend to the comments, and we'll pop in and respond. Let's talk a little bit about this book. Let's open up about our favorite parts, what you rated it, what you compare it to, all the same things that we did. Fill that stuff out in the comments, let's start a discussion there. This is great. I can't wait. I don't know what the next thing coming out. I should have looked that up.
I don't really know either. They show up in my mailbox, and so I'm guessing the last time
Sweet brag.
Well, I heard that. Yeah, I know, sweet brag. No, I didn't mean to sound like that, but like that, they kind of like surprise us with that kind of stuff. So I think there's the Skywalker Legacy by Delilah S. Dawson is the next thing that I saw, at least on the Disney publishing. But I don't know about, I think Del Rey's, is it The Resistance Reborn by Rebecca Roanhorse? I think that might be the next Del Rey publication. It could be that.
There's the kid who like picks Force Collector or whatever.
Oh yeah, the Force Collector.
That's coming out as well. So I don't know. There's a couple that we're gonna talk about. When they roll out.
Yeah.
There's also a New York Comic-Con coming up, and there's a Lucasfilm Publishing panel there as well. So we might be getting a few more announcements there as well. So that should be right around the corner. So
yeah.
All right. Well, that's it, man. I'll catch you later.
Good talk, James. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you, and we'll see you next time.